First off, everyone needs to listen to your podcast. 'Cause I think you guys are probably my most favorite industry podcast out there because you guys really teach actors how to actually be entrepreneurs, how to actually market themselves. So I also do feel like every actor should think of themselves as a business person.
Today we're gonna get into a pretty big topic. This has been an episode that we've talked that's been like on the docket for a long time, and to be honest, it's been kind of at the core.
On the
It's been a
docket for a long
backbone of-
time.
It has,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
There you go.
Because but it's one of those ones that like I'll put out for like I'll schedule for
sure,
4
sure.
months because it's like what is the conversation, and it's all about finding balance, and specifically around this idea of growing a creative career without burning out. And we've been talking so much about this because well, it can feel, especially in this moment, like we're constantly spinning and coming dangerously close to burning out, and so we're gonna explore this conceit. And I think where we should begin, as Mike does 5 other things on the computer, we're gonna look at what is balance, right? So just to say, and this is just a definition that we have because I think this is interesting. You're with me, right, Mike?
Yes.
Okay. The ongoing process of aligning your time, energy, and priorities in a way that supports both your personal well-being and professional or creative aspirations without feeling constantly overextended or neglecting important areas of your life. And I think that's a pretty good definition of the idea of
the
balance.
idea of balance. I mean, in our context of what we're talking about,
What do you mean?
Well, I think that balance means many things, in terms of
can I balance on the teeter-totter?
Yeah, but also balance in life, I think, doesn't just mean like, your career versus your life. However, this is what we're sort of, and it's not just your career we're talking about, but this is sort of the lens we're taking here of like balancing creative aspirations with your personal needs. Yes, that is.
Yeah, I mean, let me read it one more time again because I think it's pretty. The ongoing process of aligning your time, energy, and priorities in a way that supports both your personal well-being and professional or creative aspirations without feeling constantly overextended or neglecting important areas.
No, but what I'm saying is, yes, I think it's a great what I'm trying to say is that there's many different things. The two binaries we're balancing here are professional life and personal life, basically, like your well-being.
Yes.
And that's the framework we're choosing to view this balance episode from. That's what we're trying to find balance in. And I think, I mean, that sounds pretty simple, but it's not to me. It's pretty complex because what makes those things up? What makes those things up, I guess, but let's.
Well, and one of the things I think is uniquely challenging for us. Well, I we all have this here, and I think this is true. In a lot of ways, it's not about a perfect equilibrium because things are constantly changing. So therefore, and I think this point is well made. I can't remember if I put this here or you did this, but balance doesn't mean equal time for everything in your life, because the priorities are going to shift. Sometimes you're going to be buying a house. Sometimes you're going to be in production for something. Sometimes you're going to be starting a new relationship. Sometimes you're going to have a health scare. Sometimes you're going to have, there as priorities constantly shift, both personal and professional. This idea of balance, kind of like to your point, actually, about the lens in which we're taking, it can mean a lot of different things.
Well, I guess my question is like, how do you know? I'm always losing you. How do you know when you've achieved balance? Like, it isn't if it isn't just based off of time spent, so giving equal time to equal things, which is, that doesn't make any sense. It's funny that that's like the framework that we sort of use. It's like, I'm giving equal time to all these things. It's like, well, why is that balance? Not everything needs equal time. Not everything, deserves equal time even. So then if it's not about time spent.
Well, do you prescribe to this definition that we've now read twice? Because the second part of it is with specifically with doing these, finding that balance without feeling constantly overextended or neglecting important areas of your
I have
life.
mixed. I do agree with the definition. I think that it even goes deeper in this way because one can even argue, I think that as human beings, it's funny. I was listening to Eckhart Tolle yesterday. Do you know who that is?
Of
And he was
course.
just talking about like, a disease or a sickness is when something is out of balance. Right. And I even think that balance can be extended to something deeper, which relates to what we're talking about, by the way, of like how you live your life. How much of your life are you, quote, in control of or managing versus how much are you living sort of in sync with nature, with whatever, with what's happening around you. That's another form of balance that I think is probably the most macro form of balance. And then what we're doing is, this is sort of like a piece of that, like a very specific piece of that, right? It's like, how much are we taking control of things versus how much are we letting go of things and letting things happening? Because I would argue,
Sure, that could be a facet of balance too. Yeah.
because yeah, I think that absolutely this is but again, I asked the question, like, and maybe we'll get to this more so at the end, I can't remember, but it's like, yeah, what I really like about what you're saying, the time thing, is because this is always where balance goes, especially when you're talking about like work-life balance. It's all about time. It's all about, where am I spending time? It's like, that's what work life balance feels about. It's like, that's the measure, but really that has nothing to do with balance. Balance has nothing to do with time per se, because certain things do not quote need more time than other things, or as much time as other things. So using time as a measurement of balance, and whether you're finding balance does this make sense what I'm saying at this point? Because the point you made about priority shift, priorities, things are changing in your life. Like, just, I'm not spending as much time on my painting while my, you know, parent is dying. It's like, does that mean I'm out of balance, or am I actually, you know what I'm saying? It's like,
Well, that's why I'll come back to the definition again, because the second part of it is the part, because basically there's obviously so many facets of balance, but if I'm finding a balance at any moment in my life where I'm not feeling overextended and I don't feel like I'm neglecting important areas of my life, well, that's probably a pretty good metric that I am in that
yeah,
moment.
not feeling overextended and not feeling like you are neglecting important areas of your life. Yeah, I'm willing. Okay, I'm willing to go down that path. Yeah.
I mean, the reason why I'm saying it is because I think the point that we're kind of getting in here is that it's going to be a personal metric. It's not going to look the same for everybody.
Yeah.
So what does that look like for us?
Yeah, I think it's a really, really good point. Yeah, no, it's funny, right? Because yeah, even just using this idea of like trusting, this idea of living in balance with nature, with life, whatever. It's like, well, you also can't be destitute, like, dead in the street. It's like there has to be some
Well,
sort of
and
foundational stuff to make sure you're taking care of yourself in some way.
and let's talk about that kind of point in relation to like this idea of balance for artists,
Sure.
because I think this is tough for artists.
Yes, it
And
is.
I think there's a lot of reasons this is tough for artists, including the fact that, let's just say, in a very practical sense, it is any business in the world is going to be, not any business, most businesses in the world are going to be very challenging to start and get up and running. Ours are even more so, and I do believe that. I think that you agree with that too. Like, our lives are uniquely challenging, and therefore it does. You and I have had this conversation many
Yeah.
times. It requires more of you than most other jobs, because it's not just about getting the word out you are the thing. You're constantly losing it. You don't really have obvious economic value to society. It feels like it. So there's this element already that the nature of what we do requires you to dangerously teeter along the lines of imbalance.
Mm-hmm.
The somewhat similar, and we have this, a lot of the conceit is like this idea of going all in.
Yes.
Of like, I'm all in on this on this project. I'm all in on this audition. I'm all in on, I'm all in.
Yeah.
But the truth is, and you're sort of saying this, as you get older, I think that makes sense probably a bit at 22 when you have the ability to crash, when you have the ability to, but I think things get harder. You get older, your body starts to wear down. Your family responsibilities become real. Things start to look. Therefore, as we have here, there are survival considerations that need to be addressed. Our lives are also chaotic.
Yes.
I mean, I flew back yesterday from doing the show. I've been gone for 2 months, living in a completely different world with a completely different schedule. And now I'm right back in a completely different world. So there's this chaotic nature of this. And then to your point about going all in, this is the note that you included. Art does require space, more than likely, to have room to percolate.
Well, and that's the thing I'm sort of, because you're talking about going in all in as a concept. And so we're talking about I think when you're talking about going all in, it isn't just in terms of going all in creatively. That's not, because what also happens is that there's also going all in on, certain other survival considerations. I think it's easy to not find this. I completely agree with you. It's like when something, because artists are sensitive, emotional creatures, they're very reactive, right? So it's easy to, whether it's like, I need to make more money, okay, I'm gonna go all in on this, or or this isn't working, so I'm gonna go all in on these things, right? It's easy to be reactive, and it isn't just on creative elements or survival elements, it's all elements. It's very easy to, like, sort of, I'll say for me, to upend my life sometimes and do extreme things. I think there's also,
like, what's an example of an extreme thing?
Well, let's take diet. Okay, it's hard to, balance with food, right? Moderation, which I think is a form of balance. It's easier to just kind of go to an extreme diet or an extreme workout, or like an extreme cutting these things out, because of, I think, number one, I think I'm a sensitive, sort of like impatient creature, but also, like, we are all bred, not just artists, to have a lot of we want short-term satisfaction. And the problem is with balance, the quote problem is that you're not going to see massive gains or massive changes quickly. It's more about building consistency and contentment, I think. Like, balance is about consistency and contentment, whereas, like, going really hard on anything.
And here's why that's tough. Again, to my point about the very first point I make. And for those listening or watching, this is a conversation we've had for a long time, because where I'm not really sensitive to the creative perspective and soul is that I see artists give themselves out all the time.
Outs of what?
Out. It doesn't feel good.
Something doesn't feel good, so I'm not going to do it.
Well, you just said consistency and contentment.
Right.
And the thing is, and things are going to be, doesn't matter what you're doing. It will likely be a challenge at some point. And the question is, what do you gauge as oh, this is good or this is bad?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, because, David Foster Wallace gave this whole speech. I'm thinking of, like, where he talks about, like, standing in line at the grocery store. Now, this is somebody who's murdered, killed themselves, or as they say, unalived himself. But he killed himself. But he talked about like, oh, it's hard for me to just stand in line in the grocery store. It's hard for me to go through life and do the mundane things. Why do I say this in relation to going all in? I feel like balance is about, because, when we talk about going all in, I feel like I want thrills. I want big results. I want thrills. I want drama. I want things to feel like they're moving, and I want things to feel, when really, like, that's not, I mean, sometimes it's life, and when those moments come along, we need to ride that. We need to, like, sometimes we need to ride those things, but life isn't always going to be a big, massive, like, sexy drama. Sometimes it's just about doing the mundane shit and, like, and being consistent with yourself. So yeah, I think what you're talking about with the outs with artists, it's about not feeling good, and it's about what I will give credit for. It's about, like, also not feeling like you're wasting your time. Like, an artist wants their life to be full
Full of
and
purpose.
magical and as intensely lived as possible.
But how do you get there? And this is where the balance piece, because look, the phrase that always comes up for me is anything worth fighting for is exactly that, a fight. And partially for me, the question of balance is about constitution, meaning, and let's bleep this name out. We bleep this name out every other episode. Is someone who when great things are happening, there's going to be some struggles. What's an example? Someone's going to drop out of something.
Yeah.
Your funder's not going to come through.
Yeah.
That space isn't going to work.
Yeah.
And what I see a lot happen is like, oh, bad.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't do it. And it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Therefore, and the reason this comes, and you said this, because so you have this note here, Mike, about balance being taking as much as you are giving. Here's what's tricky for me. And you say that hustle culture doesn't, in your opinion, doesn't really serve the artist as much because it can lead to giving a lot of energy and a lot of output of energy, but you're not necessarily specifically taking an inspiration for the work. And where I bump up against this idea when it comes to balance specifically is we're selling shoelaces, we're selling tulips on the side of the road. When we are if we just wanted to make art, live your life, just do your thing, you can make it in your basement and you can give it to your great Aunt Susie and call it a day. Your little picture, your play, whatever. Where I get caught up is when we're asking others, forget money, to take the time to consume our work.
I agree with that.
Or to then next level pay us to do our work. Then this idea of balance probably once again needs to shift.
The only thing I'll say about this is, because look, what I agree with you is that, by the way, whether you are famous or whether you're running a theater in your hometown and able to support yourself or whatever, that requires you doing stuff you're not going to want to do, period. Yeah. And also living within a capitalist system. However, I did this whole episode, I did a whole weekly gay yesterday about hard work and how I kind of think where hard work is challenging is I actually think that it's not as valuable as we make it out to be because of just the results. There are plenty of people who don't work hard who are successful. There are plenty of people who do work very hard and don't find success. It's hard work within itself means nothing, in my opinion, in terms of, for you personally, if it means something, great. But where hustle culture comes into play here, and where I feel like I have been a victim of hustle culture, is I think that solution is to work more and throw more energy at something, as opposed to taking a step back and truly using what I think is a higher form of human capital at this point, which is vision, innovation, clarity, being able to see where I'm taking things. You know, I'm not saying that hard work is not necessary, but I think that the illusion that we're living under now is that if you just throw more time, throw more energy at something, throw more money at something, that the thing will solve itself. And I just don't think that's true. So that's where, and it actually can be detrimental. There are plenty of people who, if you're running east towards the sunset, it doesn't matter how hard you're running. If you're building a business that nobody wants, if you're building a business that doesn't fit within this framework of life, it doesn't matter how much you're working. So I think the thing is with balancing this idea of we are being asked to, I agree with you. We need to work hard and do things we do not want to do in order to make a living from our art. I agree with that. It's never going to be all right in the rainbow all the way there. I just don't think that's I don't think that's life either.
Well, and I think that this is where the other hypothesis has always partially been, can you turn a non-entrepreneur into an entrepreneur? Because there is a difference here now. This is what I'm saying. From a creative standpoint, from an artistic standpoint, I really hear what you're saying. And I actually hear what you're saying in relation to the idea of even business growth, because that's the core of it. You have to be motivated and excited by the creative work and have a point of view. It's like there's a real correlation between all of this. And yet, again, it's different when you now start to go, and I would like to monetize this. It's one thing, again, I'm not personally going like, oh, don't, the only way to be an artist. No, that's not what I'm saying. I am just saying specifically that when you are now including other people, when it's not just all about you, and there's going to be a different, the balance already shifts. Because this idea of balance again, because now you're going, well, this is an interesting conversation, actually, what we're talking about, because in some ways we're saying the balance of seeking out the space-time inspiration for the creative work, and also the balance of then doing, let's take audience growth. We have been in this moment now too, in a big way of like, okay, well, in 2025, audience growth has to be a huge consideration.
If you want to, again, yes. If you want to make a living from your art, yes, I would agree with that.
Exactly. And that's an example where there's probably a healthy separation from the creation and inspiration of your art versus, and now I'm growing an audience. Part of what you and I have been talking about, for those listening and watching, is there as much of a difference? Or does the inspiration provide the essentially structure and follow through?
Yeah. No,
which is
what I'm talking. I think kind of what's behind this conversation, which is interesting, is I agree. I think that we are in a moment of different consideration where, like, when I say, hard work versus inspiration is more of a human capital thing, because it's like the people who are shifting culture, moving things around, yes, they work hard, but primarily what they're doing is, surprisingly, a lot of times, is they are working hard at the things they care about now, because they have a vision of the world they want to build, right? So they're working really hard at the things they care about. Now, this is what the challenge is, right? The challenge is what we're talking about this conversation now with balance is, how do you reconcile wanting something, having things that you want to do that you care about? Like, okay, I'll give you a perfect example. It's been hard for me right now to get the motivation. I've been writing like crazy, writing creative projects like crazy. Been at this moment in my life where I feel like after years.
Oh my gosh, how did Sunday go?
It went really well, really well.
Great.
I feel like I've been more creatively on fire than ever before. However,
Yeah.
let's take this play I wrote and this pilot I wrote. I want to make these things. If I were to just do, I don't really want to. I actually, surprisingly, this is why, like, it's like I'm not excited by the idea of how I'm going to produce the play, for instance. I'm not excited by the idea of how I'm going to make all this happen, but the fact of the matter is if I want the play to happen, I'm going to have to find the balance of, I think, trusting and surrendering over to, as an artist, as a creative, to my intuition and following what I want to do, while also still addressing the things I don't want to do but will have to do to make the thing happen. That's the balance we're talking about here. And I feel like where we have been, unlike most artists, where we have been is on the complete opposite end. Is muscling so much of trying to make things happen and not giving enough space to let things happen. Or that's my opinion. And so
that is very much your opinion.
And so you must have a different opinion, it sounds like.
I do.
So,
well, because I've run on what you're talking about. And that's what I said to you. I spent a lot of time in that place. And for me, and listen, I mean, and just to be clear for those listening, like that, the space of like running on essentially creative inspiration,
intuition, instinct, whatever.
And to your point, I don't want to minimize that because there was value in it. But it's funny how when that moment in my life sort of came to an end, the first thing I went was, okay, well, that could have gone better.
Of course.
Because if we go back to this definition of without feeling constantly overextended or neglecting important areas of my life, that was not that moment. And part of it was because I didn't have the perspective. I didn't have anything in place to sort of look at where things stood. Therefore, I think you'll prescribe to this. As I was coming back, from, again, 2 months away doing the show, you sort of live in another world. It feels like reality isn't a thing. And then you come back and you got to put you're still living day to day and taking care of things, but it's and listen, I would argue it's part of what we love about being artists is like the getting lost in the whatever the thing we're doing, and it's like an escape. But there's also something to being pretty clear-eyed.
I agree.
About and so, as a theme of this episode, what's the balance of that?
Well, this is the ultimate balance. No, this is when we're talking about balance for me and not feeling overextended while also feeling creatively inspired. The ultimate thing to balance is really, for me, when I say taking and giving, right? It's like, how much are you surrendering versus how much are you taking the reins? Because, I don't feel like I feel like so much of the past couple years for me has been having a vision that actually was kind of always shifting in some ways, and then having a plan to execute it and making sure that everything was, and this over rigidity that also didn't inspire me to actually work. However, I completely agree that I don't think that it is, if you want something, if you have a vision of your life that you want to leave behind and you want to impact people, like, you should be doing things to go after that. So when I talk about the taking and giving, for me, it's how much are you really letting go and surrendering? Because also this is where I believe, a lot of inspiration can happen for me. When people say it's hard to, this capitalist system, it's hard to make art in this capitalist system. I don't prescribe to that. There are plenty of artists who can do both, who can, filmmakers who can produce their movie, deliver on time, fuck all the other considerations, fuck what the studio wants, fuck what the audience wants. I need to get this out and make my thing. There are plenty of filmmakers who can actually consider all of those things at the same time. But there's a reason why so many artists are trying to break free from rigidity.
Well, this is why this is a
consideration.
hypothesis.
Yeah.
Because obviously there are many, I shouldn't even say a handful. There are many artists who have been able to focus on making their work, and they've careers have developed semi-organically and allowing other teams to take care of them. And then there are other artists who have had to do a lot of that themselves. I certainly prescribe to that. There are many artists who have had to play a lot of other roles in order to do it. And then there are a lot of, I would argue, the bulk of very talented creatives who unfortunately either don't have the folks around them to help them or don't have their own ability to really get in the driver's seat and make it happen.
Exactly.
Hey, you guys, Mike here. I know, jump scare. That was a segment from our latest episode of Creative Risk. And this episode, the full episode, exclusively lives on our Patreon. So if you enjoyed what you've heard so far and you want to dive deeper, community of Creative Risk, we offer 3 membership tiers starting at just $5. As a member, you'll get access to ad-free episodes, weekly motivational content, bonus full-length episodes, and much more, including a book club. Come on. But it's more than just content. Really, you'll be a part of a community that's dedicated to accountability and support, helping you stay motivated and inspired. So just head over to our Patreon, Creative Risk Podcast, patreon.com/Creative Risk Podcast. It's in the episode description as well. And sign up today, you guys. Hope to see you in our community.